The passing of 72 hours has done little to numb the shock and sadness we all felt when we heard of the tragic and senseless death of Sir David Amess. This House has lost a steadfast servant, we've lost a dear friend and colleague, and Julia and her children have lost a loving husband and devoted father. Nothing I or anyone else can say will lessen the pain, the grief, the anger they must feel at this darkest of times. We hold them in our hearts today. We mourn with them and we grieve alongside them. Sir David was taken from us in a contemptible act of violence, striking at the core of what it is to be a member of this House and violating the sanctity both of the church in which he was killed and the constituency surgery that is so essential to our representative democracy. We will not allow the manner of Sir David's death in any way to detract from his accomplishments as a politician or as a human being. Because Sir David was a patriot who believed passionately in this country, in its people, in its future. He was also one of the nicest, kindest, and most gentle individuals ever to grace these benches. A man who used his decades of experience to offer friendship and support to new members of all parties, whose views often confounded expectation and defied easy stereotype, and who believed not just in pointing out what was wrong with society, but in getting on and doing something about it.
Laughter, service, compassion. These are three of the words that spring to my mind when I think of David Amess. Laughter, because you could never have a conversation with David without laughter and smiling. Whether it was because of one of the outrageous stories that he was telling, perhaps about one of his colleagues or somebody else. But there was always smiles, always laughter, always fun around David. Service, because he had an extraordinary record of dedicated service to his constituents. And I suggest to anybody who wants to be a first-class constituency MP that you look at the example of David Amess. He was deeply embedded in his constituency and, as we all know, championed it on every possible occasion. I don't think a question or speech from David went by in this House without his constituency being mentioned in it. But he didn't just promote his constituency here in the House. He was a part of it. He understood it. He knew it. He was in the community. He was of the community. And he was respected and loved by the community. His death is tragic, and the manner of his death appalling. But isn't it fitting that his last acts were acts of service to his constituents?
So today, on behalf of the entire Labour Party, I want to lean across, to reach across, and to acknowledge the pain that's felt on the opposite benches, and I do. Of course our differences matter. After all, that's what democracy is about. But today we're reminded that what we have in common matters far more. I spoke to Joe Cox's parents on Friday afternoon because I knew that they would be reliving that terrible day. They said to me they were thinking of David's family and how their lives would be changed forever. So today, just as the Prime Minister has said, this House holds in our hearts David's wife, Julia, his children, Catherine, David Jr., Sarah, Florence, and Alex, and all of those who loved him. We cannot begin to imagine what they're going through, but our thoughts, our love, and our prayers are with them.
Among some of his closest friends, he was known affectionately as the late Sir David Amess. Well, now he really is the late Sir David Amess, isn't he? But I am absolutely determined, and I ask for your support in this, that he will not have died in vain. He's now resting in the arms of the God he worshipped so devotedly his whole life. So farewell, David, my colleague, my great friend. In fact, quite simply, the best bloke I ever knew. I thank the House for its indulgence.
He loved his mum, who lived to 104. We all in Southend assumed David would go on forever. The late Eric Forth told me that David would be the father of the house. I just thought it was going to be thus one day, but it was not so. In gathering my words, I thought of the phrase, cut short in his prime, and then smirked to myself, given they were somewhat ridiculous, age 69. But he was sprightly. He was a secret gym goer, a head full of floppy hair. I just felt that there was more ahead of him than behind him. Sadly, his future was stolen from us all, and Southend and this house are poorer for it. Over the weekend, I kept watching the news, hoping that the ending of the story or news clip would be somehow different to the previous ending. At a vigil in Southend, there were hundreds of people from all walks of life. Every story was very different, but at the same time, every story was the same. David listened, David cared, David delivered. He had a knack of getting things done, and as been said, I always expected him to turn up late, so I wasn't surprised when he wasn't at the beginning of the vigil. But I really did expect him to be there, because he's always there. It's unbelievable he's not coming back. And you think of the last meeting you had with him. I think of the last Remembrance Day service, the last Christmas with him dressing up as Santa Claus, going out and giving chocolates to the kids in Neptune Ward in Southend, whether they wanted them or not. Bringing the remainder to my kids, who would stick them to one side, and despite all rules about eating chocolate. But this is not the last of David. He lives on in us all. I don't think David would have seen himself as a mentor to people in this house. He wouldn't have called himself that, but that's what he was by demonstration and osmosis. David inspired great loyalty into his staff. His office was always packed with people, paperwork, and as anyone who's been there would know, fish and birds, despite the House authorities' ban on the subject. Part office, part museum of decades of political memorabilia, part pet shop. It was an office, like the politician, unique. He's survived by a lovely family, Julia, his wife, his children, David Jr., Catherine, Sarah, Alex and Florence. And it's with sadness that the family comes from all corners to be back together in the city of Southend. We pray for you collectively. Their statement yesterday was poignant. They said, we ask people to set aside their differences and show kindness and love to all. That should not be beyond us all. It is not a bad instruction to this House. Let's take that message back to our constituencies. Let's make some good of this horror. And to Julia, Southend thanks your husband for his service. Rest in peace, my good friend. Rest in peace.
A great backbencher, a beloved husband, and a father and dear friend to so many, particularly on the government benches. Sir David Amess was valued in so many ways, but I think the most powerful description he achieved was in some ways was the simplest and the most human. David was above all else a good and a deeply decent man. A man that would always greet you with a welcoming smile whenever you met him. For members and staff across this House, it will take time to come to terms with the terrible shock of the senseless loss of another colleague. Because just as our thoughts and prayers today are with the entire Amess family, we think too of the family of Joe Cox, who are forced to relive the nightmare of their experience all over again. Mr. Speaker, members of this House are being murdered while simply doing their job. That is the terrible reality that we are faced with. And just as we face it together, we need to put an end to it together. In providing that security and safety, we need to protect all those at risk. Because we all know that it's often our staff who are at the very front line of the threats and the abuse as well. So I welcome the review underway into MP security, but I would genuinely urge the Home Secretary to also include our staff as a central part of that security review.
Hear, hear.
The devastating loss of Sir David has once again laid bare that twin threat of terrorism and the toxic culture of hate and intolerance that has become all too common. So today, of all days, it is crucial that we show the same spirit and speak with one voice across this House, as indeed we are doing. I stand firmly with and echo the powerful and poignant words of both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. But I also want to commend them for jointly going and standing together in Southend on Saturday. That was exactly the right image and the right message to send. People need to see that image of unity on Saturday, and it is an image and ethos of political leadership that we need to project in public far more often. A healthy democracy that engages with passionate disagreement as appropriate. But we all know that somewhere along the way we have been badly diverted. For too long we have been dragged down a path where passionate disagreement has been infected by poison. All of us can do better not to feed into that corrosive culture. All of us have been a victim of it, and every single one of us have a responsibility to put an end to it. It is the truest tribute to Sir David that he personified exactly what we need to get to. He was a person whose politics could be forceful, but always a friendly, a person who could disagree without ever, not ever, being disagreeable. For the rest of this session, I look forward to hearing the fond memories from many of his colleagues and friends. The beautiful statement released by the Amess family last night put it better than I possibly could. David's lesson and his legacy is to show kindness and love to all. All of our memories will be of a good man and of a life well lived. May his family and community today know that the true depth of respect, affection and love that he enjoyed across this House. And may his gentle soul now rest in peace. God bless you, David.
Yeah.